Hi everyone, Andrew back again. I'm doing another movie review, this time for the 1993 Warner Brothers classic, Free Willy. Now, the movie starts with a beautiful musical score by Michael Jackson, and we see a pod or group of orcas. And we become very quickly aware that Willy is one of those whales, and we see them playing in the water and jumping, swimming, being orcas. And then we see these whalers, men who are trying to catch these whales, and they set up nets. They have air horns, and they surround one of the whales, which is Willy, and they cut him off from his family, who, when they realize that he's trapped, swim away. And we flash cut to Jesse, who is with a group of kids, and they are all basically orphans on the street. And they are soliciting people for money. They're going into these restaurants and gathering up all the leftovers from tables. And they also steal a large cake from the back of a truck, and they hide under these highway underpasses. Just discussing how they were left in the foster care system, how they escaped. In their minds, they escaped. And then the cops show up, and they make a run for it. And Jesse and one of the others, I believe his name was Perry, end up running through this amusement park, and they, without knowing it, set off an alarm. They go through these doors and they start graffitiing the place. These walls and these windows to the underground viewing tank of Willy's tank. And the lightning strikes and flashes and illuminates Willy and especially his teeth. And Jesse gets scared for a minute, and then Perry yells that the cops are coming. They try to make a run for it. Perry gets away somehow, we don't see. And Jesse is caught by the cops. And he is taken to his, I would assume, is his counselor, although in this case it might better say handler, who is Dwight, again played by McKelty Williamson. And he's talking about how there's this family, Glenn and Annie, the Greenwoods, who are willing to foster him and possibly adopt him, basically place him in a home. But there is a condition now, which is that Jesse has to clean up the graffiti that he and Perry did on the tank. And Jesse's really not liking this. He's obviously a very upset kid. He's a very angry kid, and he does ask if they've heard from his mother. And Dwight says nobody's heard from her in several years. And Jesse goes to the Greenwoods house with Dwight, and basically he's being a brat. He's being rude. He's just sitting down at the table starting to eat. He gets his own room. He gets a gift. He doesn't open it. He doesn't want to be there. And next day, Glenn drops him off at the amusement park, and he meets Randolph. And Randolph shows him that he has to clean everything, gives him a sponge, gives him a bucket, sends him off to do his work. And while he's doing this, Randolph catches Jesse watching Willy as Jesse plays his harmonica. And he tells him to stay away from Willy, that he's got a lot of problems. He's a very angry killer whale. And just don't go near him. And later that same day, I think, or maybe the next day, Jesse sees Ray, one of the trainers, doing a seals show, and she does a good job, obviously, with the seals. But when Willy comes out, he's just not doing anything. He's just swimming around, he's jumping around, but he's not doing anything special. And Ray talks to Jesse, you like him? You like whales? And he's like, well, I like him. And she's like, well, Willy doesn't like anybody. He's a special case. And Jesse says, aren't we all? And after a while, we see the Greenwoods trying to connect with Jesse, especially Glenn, who's like, he gives him allowance money, but he also sets some rules, like certain time to be at the house, don't sneak out, let us know where you are, all these different things. Typical things that you would expect for kids. And Jesse I think he's dealing with it okay at that moment, but unfortunately, we see him playing we see Jesse playing the harmonica again, underwater, and, in the underground viewing tank, and he sees Willy going through the water and doing these jumps, and looking at him through the glass as he plays the harmonica. And so he goes above ground, and Willy does these backward jumps, and he eventually splashes Ray, who is carrying this box of fish. And Jesse finds this hilarious, but he agrees to help Ray with the fish, getting the fish ready for Willy to eat, because they have to go through them and decide which ones are good and which ones are not. And she starts talking about how they need more money, they need all these different things. And that night, Jesse has spoken about how he's almost done with the graffiti work. He's a little sad to leave Willy, so he sneaks out of the house, and he sits on the edge of the tank, how it has the upward concrete, so it's a little above the water. He's sitting on that, playing the harmonica. Willy jumps out of the water, makes a big splash. The lights go on around the tank, and Randolph comes out. But Jesse makes a run for it on the concrete perch, falls, apparently hits his head, and falls into the tank, unconscious. Randolph doesn't see anything, turns off the light. Willy pushes Jesse with his snout, I think they call it a just his snout, sorry, and pushes him out of the water near where the seal show took place, where it's completely level with the water. Pushes him out and kind of uses his weight to get the water out of Jesse, kind of like boom, the weight, and it pushes all the water out of Jesse, who coughs and looks at Willy and says, "You saved my life." Next scene is Jesse has gone over to Randolph's. He got out of his wet clothes. He's getting warm. Randolph gives him some kind of a warm drink, and Jesse explains why he was there. That he was there to say goodbye to Willy because the job was almost done. And Randolph is like, Willy, they say an orca can look into a man and see his soul. Willy won't look at me. Or Ray. Maybe he sees you. And so Randolph takes him back to the Greenwoods, and they're very upset at him. But Randolph explains, listen, Jesse's done a good job. He's even made some friends. So I'd like to hire him part-time. We won't be able to pay him much, but we would love to have him. And Jesse basically begs them to let him. And they say, okay, we'll discuss it in the morning, even though it's pretty obvious they're going to let him do it. And Glenn says, get back in the house, son. And Jesse says, I'm not your son. And Glenn says, yeah, I know. As Jesse walks away. So obviously Jesse's still not quite on board with this family thing, even though he's starting to open up. He's still got the wall up. And so the next day, Jesse is biking to work. He's very excited. But he hears that sound that Willy makes when he's distressed. And we see that he's in one of the holding pens, one of the holding tanks, which is way too small for him. He's in a net, and they're trying to do a medical examination. And Ray keeps talking to this guy who apparently is like the second-hand man to the guy who owns the park. And he's like, we need more. We need more money. We need a larger tank. This is inadequate. I can't train this whale because you guys expect miracles. And Willy and Jesse see eye to eye at that moment. They lock eyes. Jesse undoes the net and makes it go loose. And so Randolph, he sees this, but he tells everybody, untie the tank. Untie the nets. Willy swims into the main tank, and Randolph tells Jesse, I saw what you did. So nothing. I'm sure Willy's grateful. And we see Jesse going to the pier, the local pier, to buy fish for Willy. He's buying what is considered chocolate to Willy, which is salmon, or he's trying to anyway. I'm not sure if he got it at that moment, but he's trying to. And he runs into Perry, who tells him, hey, why don't you join me and my friends, who are obviously a kind of I would say the shady of shady. And Jesse says, I'll have to catch you later on that, some other time. And Jesse goes to the tank, throws one of the fish into the water, and Willy brings it back to him. He doesn't eat it, he brings it back to him. And Jesse's like, this is your favorite, buddy, here. Go ahead. And Willy's like shaking his head and opening his mouth. And Jesse's like, oh, you want me to put in your mouth? I'll make you a deal. Don't bite off my hand, and I'll feed you the fish. He does exactly that. He gives him the fish. And at that moment, they're connecting because Willy's following him around. He's copying every move Jesse makes. Like, he does a spin, a dance move. He does the wave. He sticks out his tongue. And Randolph and Ray see this. And Ray comes over to Jesse asking him, hey, can you do that again? And he gives Willy a fish, and he gives one to Ray to give to Willy. And Willy, he's not having it at that point. He smacks his tail down, splashing them. And Ray explains, I did all these medical tests on him when he first arrived to ensure his health. But since then, he does not like me. He sees me as like the Grim Reaper or something. And she explains that the guy who owns the park, who is Dial, again played by Michael Ironside, that he sees Willy as a commodity. And that if Willy were to bring in money, he would spend money on Willy. But at the moment, that's not happening because Willy's not performing. And so she comes up with the plan that, well, you get along with Willy, so why don't you help us? We're going to train him. We're going to teach him some tricks. And so through this, they start training Willy using different methods, mainly Jesse helping. And we see him slowly improving, not only as a trainer, as a person, but also as a foster kid to the Greenwoods. He's dressing a lot better. His manners have improved greatly, especially at the dinner table. And we see him teaching Willy these different tricks, including where he would take his hand, put it in Willy's mouth, and rub his tongue. Which he at first said, yeah, that's never going to happen. But he and Willy have become so close. He'll ride on top of Willy. He'll have Willy push him on his nose. All these different things. And so, one night, Jesse goes to Glenn's place of work, which I believe is a car wash or car dealership. And he brings him dinner, and they get into a discussion about all these different pictures that Glenn has, and then it gets into family, and Jesse says, well, my mom's going to come for me one of these days. And Glenn obviously has heard differently, and he tells Jesse this, and Jesse gets really angry, and he doesn't come home right away. He actually stays out way too late. He doesn't call him, he doesn't tell them anything. Glenn has been searching for him. He gets home. Jesse goes up to his room, basically just like completely being rude again. And Glenn and Annie get into a fight over how Glenn reacted. And then when Jesse hears the fighting, he gets upset. He'd opened up the gift that Glenn and Annie had given him at first, that he had never opened. He opens it, and inside is a baseball. He takes it and throws it through his bedroom glass window. And when Glenn and Annie hear this, they rush up. They're like, what happened? And he's like, I heard the fighting. And they were upset about the window, but they were more upset at how he was feeling. So they explain, no, we fight sometimes. That happens all the time. It doesn't mean that we're going to stay mad at each other. And Glenn says, "I see you opened your birthday present." And Jesse's like, "Yeah, thanks." And next scene we get is Dial showing up with his second-hand man. I think his name was Wade. I forget his actor. I apologize. And they're there to see the training that Jesse and Ray and Randolph have put into Willy to see if they can do anything. And they put on a show. Jesse does a really great job. And Willy does everything to a T for Jesse. Everything. And Dial asks him, "You think you can make this happen? You think you can do this for a show?" And Jesse basically says, "Yeah, of course." And Dial says, "Okay, we'll do it." And he basically says, "The Willy Show. That'll make money." And I'm guessing he promotes it in a very big way because there's mascots wearing orca suits. There's a lot of orca stuffed animals. He's selling a lot of tickets. It's a full house, a full show. Unfortunately, there's all these kids in the underwater viewing area, and they bang on the windows of the tank. And Willy gets very upset. He gets very scared. While Jesse is getting on his wetsuit, and he's given a new whistle, and Dwight shows up to see this. And he's feeling very proud of Jesse. The Greenwoods are there too, seeing the show. And they're all very proud of Jesse at that moment. While at the same time, Willy is getting scared. And so they try to start the show. Jesse manages to get Willy to come to him. But Willy's not doing any of the tricks. He's terrified. He's scared. Stage fright, basically. And finally, after all the banging, Willy gets too close to the glass of the underwater viewing area, and it cracks. He cracks the one of the steel bolts that holds the tank together. And the kids get scared. Everybody in the viewing area runs out. Wade goes down there to check on things, and when he sees that the tank has been damaged, he gets this look in his eye and on his face, and he gets a thought in his mind that maybe we should do something else. And Jesse's very upset at Willy. He's very upset at everybody, especially himself, that he couldn't get this done. And so he runs off. The Greenwoods and Dwight follow him to the edge of this cliff where he's kicking rocks, he's kicking trash cans, and he's just being completely rude and dismissive of the Greenwoods. And Dwight pulls him aside finally and levels with him. When Jesse says, "My mom will come for me soon." And he's like, "When are you going to learn? When are you going to get it? Your mom left you on the doorstep, got back in the car, and drove away. Didn't slow down, didn't look back, didn't even look in the rearview mirror. Now those two people want to be your friend, which is more than your mother ever was. So think about that." And she's like, "Dwight, just shut up and leave me alone." Which I think for Jesse was the snapping point. Because as much as he didn't get along with Dwight, he never disrespected him. So that night, Jesse, he's getting these other thoughts. He has a picture of California, postcard, that Perry gave him when he ran into him another time at the stadium. And so he decides he's going to head off to California. Get back on the streets again. But first he heads over to Willy's tank to say goodbye to him and to also, just kind of yell at him, basically, because Willy's ready to play and do some tricks now, but not during the show. So Jesse's very angry. He takes his whistle and throws it as far as he can, and it lands in the water. And Willy swims away in the tank, and he starts making that same noise again that Jesse's been hearing over and over many nights in the tank. And he hears something else this time. He hears other cries. So he climbs a ladder, looks over into the bay area, and he sees and hears these other orcas, and he realizes it's Willy's family. They are still waiting for him. And while he's doing that, he happens to see this flashing light in Willy's tank. And he goes and investigates the underwater viewing area where he sees Wade and a bunch of other people working on the tank. They've got I believe, a blowtorch or a welding tool, and they've also got I think it's like a pick where you hammer at it and you break stuff. And they break off one of the steel bolts to Willy's tank, the one that was damaged. So more water is leaking out now, and it's spraying. And when they leave, and Jesse heads over to Randolph's, wakes them up, and when they get back, there's even more water pouring out, like spraying through every little crevice. And Randolph says, Willy's worth $1 million. Dial wants to collect the insurance money. And Jesse's like, let's free Willy, hence the title, because I saw his family out there. Let's take him to the bay and send him back in the ocean. And Randolph's like, I never liked this job anyway. And so they start getting things ready. They get a forklift. They get the nets. And Ray shows up, and she's like, well, what can we do? Why don't we call the police? And Randolph's like, what are the police going to do? And they do everything they can to slow the water going down. And they get him into the holding tank again. And as soon as they do, the glass and all the steel bolts that were still holding together the underwater viewing area just break. It's a flood. Water is pouring in there. All the water from his tank is leaving. It's going to leave him stranded if he doesn't get into the nets. Jesse jumps in and convinces Willy to get in. And so they head out, but they need a pickup truck. They need a trailer tractor. And so they go to Glenn's house, they steal the truck, and they try to take a back road to get Willy to the bay because they didn't want to be on the highway where they could be seen. And we see Dial on the phone with Wade about how the whale is gone, and he says, this is a disaster. We don't have theft insurance on the whale. And he tells him, go get the guys, let's get ready. And as Jesse, Randolph, and Ray are trying to take this back road, it's blocked by trees that have fallen. So they're trying to back out. The trailer nearly falls off the side of the basically the dirt road into the woods, and they can't get it back up to get it stable. So Jesse gets in contact with Glenn somehow. I forget exactly how. Oh, through the CB radio in the car. He basically gets in contact with Glenn through that and says, here's where we are, please come help. And he begs, absolutely begs Glenn and Annie to help him out because they're trying to kill Willy. And it takes a few minutes, but Glenn finally relents, tells them what to do, how to get the car and the trailer unstuck, and they do. And they head over to the car wash. And they spray down Willy to keep him wet. They have to keep him wet because if his skin dries out too much, it would be very harmful to him. In fact, he could die. And there's this funny scene where these two guys pass by who are obviously drinking. And they're like, hey, nice whale. Randolph's like, thanks. And they head over to the bay again. But this time they just take any road they can. Unfortunately, Dial, Wade, and a group of thugs, basically, have blocked the entrance, the gate. And they're trying to get them to stop. And Jesse's like, hurry, Glenn, hurry. And Glenn floors the car, floors it. And the thugs get out of the way. He crashes through the gate, turns the truck around, and backs it up straight into the water with the trailer. And it basically starts filling up Glenn's truck. And it gets Willy in the water, but Willy's not moving. So Wade and the other thugs jump into the water, trying to get to the people, trying to stop Willy, basically, from being convinced to swim away. And Wade at one point grabs Jesse. Glenn grabs Wade and says, let go, my boy. Punch! I think that's the only punch we see thrown, even though there's a big scuffle going on. Jesse convinces Willy to start swimming out of the bay. But those same people that probably caught Willy the first time, they're there again, blocking off the bay with nets and air horns and slapping the water with paddles. So Jesse runs off, goes over to this wall, this cliff of rocks, many feet high. and he talks to Willy like, "I'm gonna miss you, buddy. Just remember what I taught you. Remember this, the signal." And Willy swims away, goes under the water, goes as fast as he can, and at the same time, Jesse, remembering a story about a Haida warrior that Randolph had told him, not Sklanay, starts chanting this word, this phrase, Sanana Ayun Oasis. Sanana Ayun Oasis. And at that point, he does the move, the signal to jump. Willy jumps, and he's out. He makes it. Jesse's cheering. Everybody starts cheering. Dial is like, "God, I hate that whale," which is kind of his signature. And Jesse reunites with the Greenwoods, heads home, and Willy reunites with his family in a beautiful musical tract by Michael Jackson. And that's Free Willy for you. Now, it was made into 3 sequels, 2 regular sequels, and then another one that was basically a repeat with a baby orca instead of an older whale like Willy. We have Free Willy 2, The Adventure Home, and Free Willy 3, The Rescue. And they're good movies. I might do a review on those later on. But Free Willy, the very first, complete classic. It is the only movie using a real whale, using Keiko, the whale. And thanks to this, at the time, he was living in Mexico City. And the conditions were very poor for his health. He was in a chlorine kind of pool instead of a salt water, so it caused a lot of skin irritations. He wasn't in the best of health. And thanks to this movie, Warner Brothers got so much reaction from fans that they decided they and the fans would move Willy, and they moved him to Oregon to a much better tank where they had salt water as he was living in. It was a much bigger tank, and he improved extremely well. And then he was moved to Iceland, where they were going to prepare to release him into the wild. And in 2002, they did release Keiko into the wild through a sea pen. Unfortunately, a year later, Keiko does unfortunately die of pneumonia in 2003. Where he inspired a generation of kids, adults, and just animal fans in general, and created something great. So, thank you very much for listening to my review again, Free Willy, and enjoy the rest of your day.